They ruled with an iron grace, their power absolute. And when the sovereign's gaze, sharp as obsidian and deep as the void, finally fell upon me, I knew my fate was sealed, either annihilation or a favor that would consume my very soul. The crash had been a controlled descent, barely. My scout vessel, crippled by an unforeseen energy surge, had limped into the upper atmosphere of Xylos Prime, a world known only through long-range scans and ancient, hushed warnings. Warnings I dismissed as superstition. My training, years of honed military discipline, and a lifetime of self-reliance told me I could survive anything. I was wrong. The air here was thin, metallic-scented, and the light from the binary suns cast long, deep shadows across a city that defied comprehension. Not built, but grown. Colossal spires of living obsidian, veined with pulsing, bioluminescent pathways, reaching impossible heights. It was a testament to a power so ancient, so complete, it dwarfed my very concept of civilization. My survival on the outskirts had been brutal. I scavenged, evaded the automatons that patrolled the lower levels, and learned, through bitter experience, the absolute hierarchy of this place. The dominion of the seraphim, as the hushed, terrified whispers from other captured species called it. A matriarchy, absolute and unyielding. The females were the architects, the warriors, the rulers. The males, they were unseen, unacknowledged, serving only in the lowest, most menial capacities, their faces perpetually shrouded, their voices silent. My own status, as an unclassified male alien, was less than dirt. I was captured by a patrol of enforcers, tall, formidable women clad in iridescent, form-fitting armor that seemed to shift with the light, their movements precise, lethal. Their faces were carved with sharp, elegant lines, their eyes a uniform, unsettling gold. They moved with an authority that left no room for question, no possibility of defiance. They didn't speak, not to me. Their orders were communicated through subtle gestures, through the sheer weight of their presence. I was less than an insect. Thrown into a communal holding cell, I found myself among other alien males, various species, all downtrodden, resigned. Their eyes held a deadness that chilled me more than the cold, metallic floor. They huddled, silent, broken, accepting their fate. I couldn't. My past as a reconnaissance specialist, trained to observe, adapt, and exploit weakness, refused to let me simply exist. I watched. I listened, even though no one spoke. I studied the enforcers' routines, their subtle tells, their impenetrable discipline. My defiance was an invisible thing, a burning ember deep within. I refused to break eye contact when they stared. I refused to lower my gaze in submission as the others did. It was a small act, foolish perhaps, but it was my act. It was the only thing I had left that was truly mine. It lasted for cycles. Days bled into weeks, marked only by the shifting light of the binary suns that filtered through the high, grated windows of our cell. My body grew leaner, tougher, my senses sharper. My mind, however, was a constant battleground. The dehumanization was insidious. The forced labor, the constant surveillance, the silent contempt, it chipped away at one's sense of self, molding you into what they wanted, an obedient, invisible resource. Then, the ritual of selection. We were herded into a grand hall, cold and vast, lit by columns of pulsating energy that climbed to an impossibly high, vaulted ceiling. The air thrummed with a low, resonant hum, an almost primal vibration that settled deep in my bones. Rows of alien males, thousands strong, stood in perfect, silent formation, their heads bowed. And then, at the far end of the hall, at the apex of a colossal, tiered dais, she appeared, the sovereign. Her arrival was not announced by trumpets or fanfare, but by a sudden, profound silence that descended upon the already hushed throng. She simply was Dash. She moved with a terrible, slow grace, draped in robes of midnight black, edged with shimmering, metallic threads that caught the light like frozen stars. Her form was tall, slender, yet exuded an almost crushing power. Her face, framed by a cascade of dark, impossibly lustrous hair, was a masterpiece of severe beauty, high cheekbones, sharp jawline, and lips the color of dried blood. And her eyes, they were precisely as the hook described, obsidian sharp, deep as the void, capable of stripping you bare with a single, searing glance. She was flanked by two figures, also female, also radiating immense authority. One, her general, encased in more elaborate, spiked armor, her face a mask of brutal efficiency. The other, her high priestess, draped in shimmering veils, her presence radiating an almost supernatural calm. But all eyes, all fear, all reverence were for the sovereign herself. She stood at the edge of the dais, her gaze sweeping across the vast assembly of males. It was a clinical assessment, devoid of emotion, like a farmer surveying her crop. Each head bowed deeper as her gaze passed over them. My own instincts screamed at me to follow suit, to hide, to become invisible. But something, a stubborn ember of defiance, refused. I met her gaze. It was only for a fraction of a second. A momentary flicker in the vastness of her scrutiny. But in that fraction, a connection was made. Her obsidian eyes seemed to bore into my very soul, dissecting me, analyzing every fiber of my being. I felt exposed, vulnerable, yet a strange, almost intoxicating thrill shot through me. To be seen, to be acknowledged. Even if it was by a being of such terrifying power. She paused, her head tilted, ever so slightly. A ripple, unseen but palpable, went through the silent assembly. Then, her voice. It was not loud, but it filled the vast hall, resonating with a power that vibrated through the floor, through my chest, through my very bones. It was deep, melodious, yet carried the chill of absolute command. This one, a single, slender finger, adorned with rings of dark, polished stone, pointed directly at me. The silence in the hall became absolute, a suffocating vacuum. Thousands of eyes, previously fixed on the ground, now swiveled towards me, filled with a mix of awe, confusion, and a chilling, palpable envy. I was no longer invisible. I was singled out. Two enforcers, faster than thought, moved to my side, their hands seizing my arms. Their grip was surprisingly gentle, yet unyielding. They escorted me, not roughly, but with an almost ceremonial precision, through the stunned ranks of males, towards the dais, towards her. My heart hammered against my ribs. Annihilation? Or something else? The unknown was a gaping maw. I was brought to the foot of the dais, forced to kneel. The air around the sovereign was thick with power, with a primal, almost suffocating authority that pressed down on me. I instinctively wanted to resist, to fight, but my body, my very will, seemed to bend to her proximity. She descended a single step, her movements flowing like liquid shadow. She stopped before me, her dark robes pooling around her feet. Her face, close up, was even more striking, more terrifying. Every line, every curve, spoke of absolute control, absolute dominance. Her eyes, those abyss-like eyes, held me captive. You do not bow. Her voice, a low, captivating hum, was directly above me. It was not a question, but an observation, a challenge. My throat was dry, but the defiance, perhaps a foolish one, still lingered. I met her gaze, my chin held stubbornly high. I bow to no one, I rasped, my voice, raw and unaccustomed to speech, sounding fragile against her resonant tones. A dangerous silence. The high priestess shifted, a faint murmur of disapproval from the assembled males. The air thrummed with tension. I expected a swift, brutal punishment. Instead, a slow, predatory smile touched the sovereign's lips, a subtle, chilling twist of beauty. Interesting, she murmured, the word echoing in the silent hall. A spark of individuality in a sea of broken will. A curious anomaly. She extended a hand, her slender fingers, adorned with the dark rings, reaching towards my face. I flinched, instinctively recoiling. Her hand stopped just inches from my cheek. Her eyes narrowed. You recoil from my touch? Her voice was softer now. Almost a purr, but laced with an undeniable edge of menace. Do you not understand the significance of this moment, creature? You have been chosen. You have been granted favor. The word resonated through the hall, echoed by a low, reverent murmur from the high priestess and the general. Favor. It was not mercy. It was something far more complex, far more dangerous. Her fingers finally brushed my cheek, surprisingly soft, cool. It was a fleeting touch, yet it sent a shiver through me, a strange mix of revulsion and an unsettling, forbidden thrill. A single tear, whether of fear or something else, traced a path down my cheek. She watched it, her gaze analytical. "Take him," the sovereign commanded, her voice regaining its commanding resonance. "Prepare him. He will serve in my personal retinue. He will learn the true meaning of devotion." The enforcers lifted me, my legs still trembling. As I was led away, I looked back at her. The sovereign stood, poised, serene, her obsidian eyes fixed on me, a faint, predatory smile still gracing her lips. I was not annihilated. I had been granted favor. And I knew, with a chilling certainty, that this was only the beginning of my true captivity. ####The Sovereign's Favor, Part 1. The Golden Cage. My new life began not with chains, but with silks. I was taken to a private wing of the colossal palace, a labyrinth of chambers far removed from the bleak communal cells. The walls here were not cold metal, but polished, shimmering stone that seemed to pulse with an inner light. The air was scented with exotic, cloying perfumes and a faint, sweet aroma of something burning, an incense that settled deep in my lungs, calming, almost intoxicating. I was bathed, not roughly, but with a ceremonial reverence, by silent, graceful female attendants whose faces were veiled. They applied scented oils to my skin, massaged my aching muscles, and dressed me in garments of impossibly fine, flowing fabrics, a stark contrast to the coarse rags I'd been wearing. My diet shifted from recycled nutrient paste to rich, exotic foods and potent, sweet elixirs that left a warm, buzzing sensation in my veins. My body, once lean and hard from deprivation, began to soften, to ease into this new, unexpected luxury. The change in status was immediate and absolute. The other males, even those higher in the lower ranks, now averted their gaze with a mix of fear and strange deference when they saw me, escorted by the sovereign's personal guards. I was marked. I was hers. My mind, however, remained a churning storm of questions. What did favor mean? What was expected of me? Was this a prolonged torture? A sophisticated form of psychological warfare? My initial duties were simple, almost absurdly so. I was to stand in her presence during court sessions, a silent, ornamental fixture. I was to escort her to ceremonial functions, walking a prescribed number of paces behind her, always vigilant, always aware of her proximity. I was a living prop, a symbol of her power, a testament to her unique, unconventional choice. The sovereign, whose name I learned was Xylia, rarely addressed me directly. When she did, it was with a cool, formal tone, her voice a deep resonance that vibrated through me. "You will accompany me to the Obsidian Council," she would command, her eyes, like shards of obsidian, flicking to me for a fleeting moment. "Or, ensure the ceremonial oils are prepared before the dawn ascensions." Her instructions were precise, leaving no room for misinterpretation or personal initiative. My role was one of absolute obedience, of anticipation of her every unspoken need. Yet, there was an insidious allure to it. The sheer proximity to power. I witnessed the inner workings of their society, the cold, calculating efficiency of Xylia's rule. I watched her dismantle rebellious factions with a single, cutting word, her decisions absolute, unquestioned. I saw her mete out punishment with a serene, almost ritualistic detachment. It was terrifying, yes, but also utterly mesmerizing. Her power was a tangible force, a living current that flowed from her, electrifying the very air around her. Her general. A woman named Kaelin, whose armor was always gleaming, her movements sharp and decisive, regarded me with a silent, watchful intensity. She was the implement of Xylia's will, the iron fist. Her presence was cold, intimidating, yet sometimes I caught a flicker of something in her golden eyes, an almost imperceptible hint of a challenge, or perhaps a warning. The high priestess, Seraphina, was the embodiment of grace and ancient wisdom. Her veiled form moved with ethereal fluidity, and her voice, when she spoke, was a melodic whisper that somehow still commanded absolute attention. She was the keeper of their rituals, the weaver of their spiritual authority. Her gaze, when it met mine, held a strange, knowing quality, as if she could see the turmoil beneath my placid exterior and was amused by it. My internal monologues were a constant churn of observation and self-reproach. Why am I here? What do they want? Why do I find myself drawn to this terrifying power? The answer, insidious and unsettling, began to emerge. The attention, the validation, the sheer, overwhelming presence of their absolute authority. To be singled out, to be seen by such beings, was a paradoxical form of empowerment, even in my absolute submission. It was a golden cage, yes, but one that shimmered with an intoxicating light. The favor was not just about privilege, it was about performance. My role was to embody silent, flawless devotion. My physical appearance, my demeanor, my every movement had to reflect the honor of my chosen status. I was a living testament to Xylia's discerning eye. This constant pressure, this demand for perfection, was a subtle form of control, constantly reinforcing my place in the hierarchy, solidifying her ownership. There were moments when the favor felt like an insidious poison, slowly corroding my will. During ceremonial gatherings, Xylia would occasionally glance at me, a brief, almost imperceptible tilt of her head, and a wave of raw, undefinable power would wash over me. It was not a physical touch, but a psychic caress, a direct infusion of her authority, her sheer, overwhelming presence. It would leave me breathless, my heart pounding, my mind momentarily blank, utterly subsumed by her will. It was terrifying, but also profoundly intoxicating, like a forbidden drug. One evening, after a particularly grueling session of the Obsidian Council, where Xylia had presided over the dismantling of a minor noble house with cold, effortless precision, she dismissed her court. Only I remained. The vast chamber felt enormous, silent, permeated by the residual hum of her power. She turned, slowly, her dark robe swirling around her. She walked towards me, her steps measured, deliberate, each footfall a soft echo in the immense hall. I stood, unmoving, my breath held captive in my lungs. Her eyes, usually so sharp, now held a deep, unfathomable quality, almost inviting. She stopped inches from me. I could feel the heat radiating from her body, the subtle scent of her unique perfume, stronger now, heady. "You observe much," she stated, her voice a low murmur, directly in front of my face. "Your mind, I perceive, races with questions. Is this not so, human?" I hesitated, caught between the instinct for self-preservation and a desperate need for answers. "Yes, sovereign," I managed, my voice barely a whisper. "I seek to understand." A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched her lips. "Understanding is a privilege, not a right," she purred, her finger, cool and slender, tracing the line of my jaw. The touch was light, yet sent a tremor through my entire body, a shiver that was both fear and something else, something deeply unsettling. But for the favored, a glimpse may be permitted. Her gaze intensified, boring into mine. "Tell me, human, what do you see when you look upon me?" The question was a test, a trap. The answer was supposed to be reverence, devotion. But my mind, despite her overwhelming proximity, was still defiant. "I see power," I admitted, my voice surprisingly steady. "Absolute, unquestioned, and beautiful." Her smile widened, a slow, sensual unfolding. "Beautiful," she repeated, a note of satisfaction in her tone. An unexpected insight. Most males merely tremble. You observe the aesthetics of dominance. Her thumb stroked my lower lip, a deliberate, sensual gesture that sent a jolt of forbidden desire through me, a primal response to her overwhelming authority. It was a deeply unsettling mix of fear and raw, instinctual attraction. This was power, transformed into a form of exquisite seduction. Power, in its purest form, is indeed beautiful, human, she continued, her voice a hypnotic whisper. It is the harmony of will, intellect, and control. It is the antithesis of chaos. And you, perhaps, have a capacity to appreciate it. A raw, untamed capacity. She stepped back, the intense proximity broken, leaving me breathless, disoriented. "Your duties for the morrow will be different," she commanded, her voice regaining its formal, regal tone. "You will train in the chambers of resonance. The favor, human, is a path, and you have only just begun to walk it." The chambers of resonance. The name alone sent a chill down my spine. It sounded like a place of conditioning, of deeper immersion. The allure of her attention, which had promised privilege, now seemed to demand something far more profound, the ultimate submission of my mind, my will, my very self, to her absolute authority. I was a chosen captive, and the gilded cage was about to become infinitely tighter. My journey into the heart of their matriarchy had just truly begun. ###The Sovereign's Favor, Part 2. The Erotic Weight of Control. The chambers of resonance were unlike anything I had yet seen within the palace. Not grand or opulent, but stark, almost brutalist, carved from a material that absorbed light, rendering the space in shades of deep gray and oppressive shadow. The air here vibrated with a constant, low thrum, a sound that seemed to bypass my ears and resonate directly in my skull, a subtle pressure on my consciousness. This was a place of power, but not ceremonial. It was raw, technological, and deeply invasive. My training was not physical. It was psychological. I was placed in a central chamber, surrounded by shimmering, almost invisible energy conduits that pulsed with that same low thrum. Xylia herself, sometimes with Kalen or Seraphina observing from behind a veil of shimmering energy, would oversee these sessions. She never touched me directly in these chambers, but her presence was a constant, suffocating weight. Her voice, sometimes a direct command, sometimes a soft, alluring whisper, would guide me, push me, delve into the recesses of my mind. Focus, human, her voice would resonate, reverberating through the chamber, seeming to originate from within my own thoughts. Feel the power. Feel the order. Let it fill you. Let it replace the discordant echoes of your past. She spoke of my past with a detached, analytical precision, as if reading from a data scroll. My military training, my ingrained need for control, my resilience, these were not weaknesses to be crushed, but traits to be repurposed. Your defiance, she would purr, her voice a silken thread unspooling in my mind, is merely untamed will. We will channel it. We will mold it into something beautiful, something useful. The training involved prolonged periods of sensory immersion. I would stand for hours, sometimes days, in the center of the chamber, bombarded by controlled sensory input. Visions of the Dominion's power, its vastness, its absolute control, would flood my mind. Images of grand fleets, of conquered worlds, of countless males serving in silent obedience. Alongside these, overwhelming bursts of pleasure, tailored precisely to my deepest, most primal desires, would surge through me. Not crude, but refined, exquisite, designed to mimic the fulfillment of every unspoken longing. It was a form of subliminal conditioning, associating their power with ultimate gratification. During these immersions, the line between my own thoughts and her projections blurred. I would feel a powerful surge of loyalty, a profound sense of belonging, a desire to serve her with every fiber of my being. It was intoxicating, seductive, dangerous. My will, once fiercely independent, felt like a wax candle melting under her focused heat. Kalen, the general, would sometimes enter the chamber during these sessions, her imposing form a silent sentinel. Her golden eyes would study me, not with judgment, but with a cold, professional assessment, as if evaluating the progress of an experimental weapon. I felt like a fascinating subject, undergoing a fascinating transformation. Seraphina, the high priestess, on the other hand, exuded a subtle, almost spiritual allure. Her presence was softer, more insidious. She would stand veiled, her whispers sometimes echoing Xylia's commands, but imbued with a mystical quality. Surrender to the flow, chosen one, her voice would murmur, a hypnotic cadence. Find peace in the unity. Your spirit seeks its true purpose. Her words were designed to appeal to something deeper, something spiritual within me, turning my submission into an act of reverence. The eroticism of this favor was not overt, not crude. It was woven into the very fabric of their control. It was the thrill of powerlessness in the face of absolute dominance. It was the exquisite tension of anticipation, the promise of fleeting reward for absolute obedience. It was the knowledge that my body, my mind, my very being was hers to command, hers to shape. The subtle touches, the lingering gazes, the words whispered in my mind, they were carefully deployed instruments of seduction, designed to elicit not just compliance, but an almost religious devotion. My internal monologues became a desperate struggle to hold on to my sense of self. This is not real. This is manipulation. Resist. But the lure of their power, the intoxicating sensation of her attention, chipped away at my resolve. There was a part of me, a primal, vulnerable part, that craved this ultimate surrender, this release from the burdens of self-determination. To simply be hers, to exist in the intoxicating light of her favor, seemed like an escape from all my anxieties, all my fears. I began to anticipate her commands, to read her subtle cues before she even uttered them. My movements became more fluid, more aligned with the rhythms of the palace. I became an extension of her will, a perfectly tuned instrument in her grand symphony of control. This efficiency, this harmony with her desires, was rewarded with further favor, access to restricted areas of the palace, glimpses into their advanced technology, a deeper, more personal form of her attention. One session, Xylia commanded me to focus on a particular conduit, a shimmering column of energy pulsing in the center of the chamber. "Feel it, human," she commanded, her voice resonating deeply within me. "This is the source, the heart of our dominion. It flows through me. It flows through all who truly serve." As I focused, a strange sensation bloomed in my mind. It was not just light and sound. It was a profound surge of collective consciousness. A vast, interconnected network of female minds, a symphony of thought, purpose, and unyielding will. It was the source of their power, their uncanny coordination, their seemingly effortless dominance. It was the hive mind of the seraphim. And then, I felt it, a faint, almost imperceptible tremor within that vast collective. A discord, a tiny, foreign note in their perfect symphony. It was a fleeting impression, easily dismissed, but it was there. And it was male. My breath caught. I wasn't the only one. As if sensing my awareness, Xylia's voice, sharp and cold, cut through the mental landscape. "Do not seek what is not offered, human. Focus only on what is given." The overwhelming wave of pleasure slammed into me, shattering the fleeting glimpse of discord, pulling me back into the carefully curated reality of my devotion. I staggered, my mind reeling, the image of the male tremor fading, replaced by a torrent of ecstatic sensation. Later, in the privacy of my chambers, the memory haunted me. I wasn't unique. I was one of many. A chilling realization. Favor wasn't a singular honor, it was a process. A cycle. What happened to the others? Were they too broken and remade into willing instruments? Or were they simply discarded? The opulent chamber. Once a symbol of privilege, now felt like a gilded cage, its walls closing in. The perfume, once intoxicating, now felt cloying, suffocating. The reality of my situation slammed into me with a force that surpassed any of their engineered pleasures. My freedom wasn't just suppressed, it was being systematically erased. My very identity was under assault. I had to find out. I had to understand the true nature of their favor. And I had to find a way out before I became just another empty shell, another broken will in their vast, terrifying network of control. The choice between blissful submission and painful freedom had never been so stark, so terrifying. My internal battle intensified. Every touch, every commanding glance from Xylia now carried a double meaning. The fear was acute, but so was the insidious allure. To yield, to simply be hers, promised a release from this agonizing internal conflict. It promised a kind of peace, albeit a hollow one. But the thought of becoming a tool, a mere extension of her will, filled me with a deep, visceral revulsion. I started to observe the other favored males, those few who occasionally appeared in the sovereign's inner court. They were always impeccably groomed, their faces serene, almost vacant. Their eyes, though, held a distant, unsettling glow, a reflection of the collective consciousness they were connected to. They moved with a chilling grace, anticipating the sovereign's every need, their individuality seemingly dissolved into a perfect, silent devotion. Was this my future? During one of my training sessions in the chambers of resonance, I dared to push back, subtly. When Xylia commanded me to focus on her power, I tried to introduce a small, defiant thought into my own mind, a memory of my ship, of the vast emptiness of space, of the simple, brutal freedom of survival. Her presence, usually a gentle current, sharpened into a sudden, piercing cold. "What is that discord, human?" Her voice, now devoid of all allure, thundered in my mind. "A flicker of resistance? An echo of your primitive self?" A jolt, not of pleasure, but of excruciating pain, coursed through my nervous system, a searing agony that threatened to shatter my consciousness. I screamed, a raw, animal sound that was instantly stifled, muffled by the oppressive energy field. I collapsed, writhing, unable to move, unable to breathe. Xylia stood over me, her face a mask of cold fury, her eyes blazing with an almost blinding light. "I do not tolerate insubordination," she declared, her voice resonating with an almost physical force that vibrated through my bones. "Your favorite status is a privilege, not a right. It demands absolute obedience, absolute surrender. Do you understand, human?" "Yes," I gasped, the word torn from my throat, my body still convulsing with residual pain. "Yes, sovereign." The pain receded, replaced by an overwhelming sense of profound shame and terror. She knew. She always knew. My every thought, every rebellious spark, was open to her. There was no escape within this palace, not mentally, not physically. The gilded cage was unbreakable. Hashtag the sovereign's favor. Part 3. The price of transcendence. The incident in the chambers of resonance left me physically and psychologically shattered. The pain, while brief, had been a stark reminder of her absolute power, her willingness to inflict torment if her favor was not perfectly reciprocated. More profoundly, it revealed the extent of her mental penetration. My thoughts, my last bastion of freedom, were compromised. I was truly, utterly exposed. My duties continued, but my performance was now infused with a new, chilling precision. I moved with a heightened awareness of her presence, anticipating her needs with a chilling accuracy. I became the perfect favored male, a silent, graceful shadow, a living testament to her absolute control. My expression remained placid, my eyes serene, reflecting only devotion. But inside, a desperate, frantic struggle raged. The psychological pressure was immense. The seductive whispers of her power, the promise of ultimate belonging within her ordered world, warred with the primal scream of my individuality. I saw the other favored males now with a new understanding, not just as broken wills, but as cautionary tales. Their vacant eyes, their utterly subservient demeanor, were the price of their peace, the cost of their absorption into her collective will. They were the ultimate trophies of her conquest. One cycle, Xylia summoned me to her private quarters. This was unprecedented. Even the general and the high priestess rarely entered this inner sanctum. The chamber was dimly lit, bathed in a soft, pulsating light that emanated from the walls themselves. It felt ancient, sacred, yet also strangely intimate. The air was thick with her unique perfume, overwhelming my senses. She sat on a low, ornate throne, carved from what looked like pure, dark crystal. She wore a simple, flowing gown of deep violet, unadorned by the usual regalia, yet she exuded more power than ever before. Her hair, unbound, cascaded around her, shimmering in the ambient light. "Approach, human." Her voice was a low purr, devoid of its usual formality. It was an invitation, a command, a subtle caress that bypassed my defenses and resonated deep within my core. I knelt before her, my heart hammering. This was it. The final test. The ultimate offer. "Your progress has been exceptional," she murmured, her slender finger tracing the curve of the crystal armrest. "Your will, while once stubborn, has proven to be remarkably adaptable. You possess a unique capacity for devotion, once properly channeled." "I live to serve, sovereign," I replied, the words practiced, hollow, yet imbued with a terrifying sincerity that scared even me. My voice was calm, steady, betraying none of the turmoil within. She smiled, a slow, sensual unfolding that sent a jolt of primal desire through me. It was the same smile she had given me at the ritual of selection, but now it held a deeper, more personal meaning, a promise of ultimate intimacy. "Indeed," she purred. "And now, your service will be rewarded with a deeper understanding, a greater connection." She rose from her throne, her movements fluid, hypnotic. She walked to me, and for the first time, placed her hands on my shoulders. Her touch was not cold, not calculating, but infused with a raw, undeniable power that flowed into me, warming my skin, electrifying my nerves. "The core of the dominion," she whispered, her voice a deep, resonant hum, "is more than just power. It is transcendence. It is the culmination of all knowledge, all will, all experience. And it flows through me, through every sovereign, through every true servant." Her grip on my shoulders tightened, gently but firmly. Her eyes, inches from mine, glowed with an internal, golden light, reflecting the pulsing walls of the chamber. I felt a familiar pressure behind my eyes, a subtle probing, but this time it was not merely an invasion. It was an invitation. "You have seen glimpses," she continued, her voice resonating in my very thoughts. Flickers of the great collective, the shared consciousness. Now, you will experience it directly. You will become part of something far greater than your singular, limited self. A torrent of images, sensations, and raw knowledge flooded my mind. I saw the Dominion, not as a city, but as a vast, living organism, its spires stretching across worlds, its reach extending across star systems. I felt the collective will of countless beings acting in perfect, synchronous harmony. Their history, their conquests, their triumphs, it poured into my mind, overwhelming, breathtaking. I saw the sheer, unassailable power of their unity. And within this vast tapestry, I saw my place. Not as a slave, not as a tool, but as a valued component. My unique resilience, my observational skills, my raw, untamed defiance, these were not weaknesses, but strengths she intended to integrate, to enhance her own being, to add a new flavor to the collective. I was not merely a battery, I was an upgrade. And then, I saw the true price. Within the vast collective, I glimpsed the fragmented echoes of other male minds, other favored ones. Their individuality was gone, their memories integrated, their consciousnesses dissolved, becoming mere threads in the grand tapestry of the seraphim. They had found their peace, their purpose, by ceasing to be themselves. Their faces, projected into my mind, were serene, yes, but utterly empty. They were beautiful, perfectly controlled components existing in an eternal, shared, but ultimately impersonal consciousness. My heart seized. This was not favor. This was elegant, insidious consumption. This was the ultimate form of power, to absorb, to refine, to repurpose another being's very essence. Xylia's face, close to mine, held a look of profound, almost religious ecstasy. "Do you feel it, human?" she whispered, her voice resonating with the power of the collective. "The boundless freedom of purpose? The end of all doubt? The ultimate surrender?" The temptation was immense. To shed the burden of my individuality, to embrace this profound connection, to become part of something truly transcendent, to finally silence the screaming void of loneliness. It was the ultimate seduction, the most profound allure. To be free of fear, of pain, of choice. To simply be a part of her. But the image of those vacant faces, the echoes of lost selves, flashed in my mind. No, this was not peace. This was annihilation, elegantly disguised. "No," I roared, the word tearing from my throat, raw and desperate. I broke her touch, pulling away from her, stumbling backward. The sudden disconnection from the collective consciousness was a painful wrench, a tearing sensation behind my eyes. Xylia's face hardened, her expression shifting from beatific ecstasy to cold, terrifying fury. Her golden eyes blazed, radiating an intensity that seemed to warp the very air around her. "You resist," she hissed, her voice no longer a whisper, but a harsh, guttural sound, echoing with the primal rage of an offended goddess. "After all I have offered? All I have shown you?" The walls of the chamber pulsed violently, the air thick with crackling energy. The pressure on my mind intensified, crushing, agonizing. It was the full, unbridled force of her power, of the collective, aimed directly at my singular, defiant consciousness. "I choose myself," I screamed, the words a challenge thrown against the tidal wave of her wrath. "I choose to be free." "Freedom," she scoffed, a chilling laugh, devoid of mirth. "Freedom is chaos. Freedom is weakness. I offer you purpose. I offer you power beyond your comprehension. I offer you an end to suffering. And you reject it for what? A fleeting illusion of self?" She lunged, not with brute force, but with a terrifying speed and an aura of pure, focused power. She was no longer just a ruler. She was a force of nature, embodying the raw, unyielding will of her entire species. I stumbled backward, my mind reeling, my body screaming in protest as her psychic assault intensified. This was the ultimate confrontation, a battle not just for my life, but for my very soul. ####The Sovereign's Favor, Part 4, The Scars of Freedom. The chamber writhed around me, the pulsing light from the walls intensifying into blinding flashes, the low thrum escalating into a deafening roar. Xylia was a blur of motion, her robes swirling, her form radiating an almost palpable heat. Her psychic assault was relentless, a targeted strike at the core of my consciousness, attempting to overwhelm my will, to force my integration. Memories, fears, desires, they were all weaponized, twisted into a maelstrom designed to shatter my mind. Yield, human. Her voice, amplified, distorted, echoed from every surface of the room. Surrender to destiny. Become part of the infinite. I fought back, instinctively, desperately. My training, my years of pushing past physical and mental limits, kicked in. I focused on the pain, the real, searing agony behind my eyes, the strain in my muscles. This pain was mind-dash. It was real. It was the anchor to my individuality. I pushed against the psychic current, not with power, but with raw, unyielding defiance. I remembered the male tremor in the collective consciousness, that tiny spark of discord. It was an anomaly, a flaw. Perhaps not all of them were truly integrated. Perhaps some still harbored a ghost of their former selves, a hidden resistance. And if so, perhaps the collective was not as seamless as she portrayed. Your perfection is a lie. I screamed, the words tearing from my throat, raw and defiant. You consume. You do not create. My words, a direct challenge to her fundamental truth, seemed to strike a chord. Her psychic attack faltered for a fraction of a second, a ripple in her overwhelming power. It was enough. I lunged, not at her, but towards the nearest wall panel, a complex array of glowing symbols that pulsed with the same energy as the conduits in the chambers of resonance. This chamber, I realized, was not merely her private quarters. It was a conduit, a direct link to the source, the very core of the Dominion's power. If I could disrupt it, even for a moment. Xylia recovered instantly, her fury mounting. Fool, you cannot harm the source. She moved to intercept me, faster than I could anticipate, her hand reaching out, radiating destructive energy. But Seraphina's words, from the ceremonial chambers, echoed in my mind. Understanding is a privilege, a glimpse may be permitted. And her hand, brushing my cheek, her finger tracing my jawline. Her question, what do you see when you look upon me? Her greatest strength was her mind, her greatest weapon, her psychic power. But her control, her precision dash, was absolute. A being of such power would also have a failsafe, a weakness built into the very design of their system, a way to prevent uncontrolled surges or to recalibrate the source. I remembered the tiny, almost invisible handprint indentation at the door of the harvest chamber. It was a physical key, but also a mental one, tied to my unique biosignature, my essence. With a desperate surge of adrenaline, I slammed my palm against the luminous wall panel, not physically, but psychically, pouring all my desperate will, all my raw, untamed mental energy into a single point, targeting the subtle flicker of discord I had sensed earlier within the collective. I didn't know what it was, but I knew it was an anomaly, an impurity in her perfect system. A deafening shriek erupted from the walls, not a sound of triumph, but of agony. The entire chamber shuddered violently. The glowing symbols on the panel flickered erratically, then went dark. The low thrum of the resonance chambers ceased. The immense pressure on my mind vanished, replaced by a sudden, jarring emptiness. Xylia reeled back, staggering, her hands flying to her temples. Her eyes, moments ago blazing with golden light, were now wide, unfocused, filled with something akin to shock, perhaps even pain. The overwhelming aura of power that radiated from her faltered, flickering like a dying flame. Impossible, she gasped, her voice raw, fractured, a sound of genuine disbelief. The human? How? I didn't wait for answers. The disruption was momentary, but it was enough. The vast, silent doors of her private chamber, now devoid of their psychic locks, hissed open. I lunged through, driven by a primal, desperate need for escape. The corridors beyond were dark, silent. The palace plunged into a chilling stillness. The absence of the pervasive hum, the absence of the constant psychic pressure, was almost as disorienting as its presence. The beautiful, imposing architecture now felt cold, alien, empty. I was free, yes, but profoundly, terrifyingly alone. I ran, my bare feet slapping against the polished stone, the silence amplifying the frantic beat of my heart. I didn't know where I was going, only away. Away from her, away from the gilded cage, away from the chilling promise of favor and submission. My mind was a chaotic symphony of triumph and terror. I had defied her. I had struck a blow against the seemingly unassailable power of the sovereign. But the cost? The cost was profound. I found my way back to the outer sectors of the palace, to the rough, utilitarian areas where male captives usually toiled. The automatons were still patrolling, but their movements seemed slower, less coordinated. The entire Dominion felt hushed, disrupted. My reckless act had done something. I eventually found an unguarded service entrance, leading out into the cold, metallic-scented air of Xylos Prime. The binary suns were low on the horizon, casting long, stark shadows. The colossal obsidian spires still reached for the sky, silent, imposing, but now they felt less like a monument to power and more like a tomb. I was free. My body was bruised, battered, but my mind, though scarred, was still my own. I had chosen the painful truth, the brutal reality of survival in a hostile universe, over the intoxicating lie of submission and favor. But the experience had changed me forever. The profound allure of her power, the subtle seduction of her authority, the exquisite tension of almost complete surrender, it lingered in my mind, a phantom limb, an echo of a forbidden desire. I had glimpsed a different kind of existence, one where purpose was absolute, where control was total, where individuality was subsumed by a terrifying, beautiful unity. I was scarred, yes. My memories of the palace, of Xylia, were not just of terror, but of a strange, unsettling admiration. Her ruthlessness, her intelligence, her absolute mastery. It was a dark, terrifying beauty. And the favor, that perverse, consuming gift, had left an indelible mark on my soul. As I staggered away from the towering city, towards the desolate, shifting landscape, I knew I would never truly be free of her. Her presence, her power, the chilling offer of ultimate submission, would forever haunt my dreams. The line between captivity and reverence, between freedom and oblivion, had blurred irrevocably. I was a survivor, but what had I truly survived? The body was free, but the mind carried the imprint of her power, the whispers of her command, the ghost of a desire for absolute surrender. Had I truly escaped? Or had I simply carried the gilded cage within me, a psychological prison forged from the terrifying allure of the sovereign's favor? The answer was lost to the cold, indifferent stars and to the endless, echoing silence of my own fractured soul.